Well, let's move into the next segment and the last segment, and that is the 2019 season preview for the Chicago Blackhawks. We're going to welcome in our patron, Sam, onto the podcast. The first time that I've been able to do a Blackhawks topic podcast. So, Sam, I want to thank you for that one.
Yeah, I know. We can sort of consider this like a backdoor pilot podcast for any potential like future hockey ventures for MVP in an indirect way, perhaps.
Yeah, the only thing I was able to do was playoff previews because we didn't have a person to do hockey with. So I appreciate that. We're previewing the Blackhawks. Obviously, this has been a dynasty for a while, or at least it was a former dynasty, starting in that 2009 season where they went to the Western Conference Finals. Lost to the Red Wings, and that was really the start of it. Then we have the Cup in 2010, some down years in 2011, 2012, then another Cup in 2013, then another down year a little bit in 2014.
Should have won it that year.
Should have won in the Western Conference Finals, and then in 2015, another Stanley Cup, and then after that, it's been some rough years, especially with being the 1 seed and losing to the Predators the year before, and then last year missing the playoffs entirely for the Blackhawks. This was a team, though, that did have a very strong second half of last year, but they were one of the worst defensive teams in all of the NHL last year. So, Sam, looking at this team and the additions that they made in the offseason, goaltender Robin Lehner, Calvin DeHaan from the Carolina Hurricanes, Ali Mata from the Pittsburgh Penguins, bringing back Andrew Shaw. What do you think the Blackhawks' outlook is for this year?
I would sort of like... just to simplify it for more non-hockey aficionados, I would sort of compare it to sort of like what the Bulls did this offseason. They basically made a good amount of trades and free agency moves that basically, these are guys who aren't necessarily the most sexiest names on the market, but they're pretty damn good and they fill a role we need, and they're going to make us a lot better than we were like last year, for the love of God.
Yeah, last year it was a team that had a 22 negative goal differential, scored 270, which was one of the highest in the NHL, but they also allowed, I think it was the most goals, or second most goals, behind the Senators last year. So this was a team that struggled defensively. They went out and got Ali Mata, who is a Stanley Cup winner in the Penguins. Not a great defender, mostly known as an offensive defenseman, and then getting Calvin DeHaan as well, who is a two-way defender from the Carolina Hurricanes, former top 5 pick, I believe, as well. And then they get Robin Lehner, who had a fantastic year with the Islanders as a goaltender, and that was mainly due to the issues that Corey Crawford has been dealing with health-wise. A big part of their reason that they won 3 Stanley Cups was their play of the goaltender, whether that be Antti Niemi or Corey Crawford. With that, Sam, how big of a part, because that to me is the most intriguing part of this whole Blackhawks team, is that goaltending situation. How big of an addition do you think it was to get Robin Lehner on this Blackhawks team, and what impact do you think he will have for this team?
I mean, considering like how much of a ridiculous year that guy had statistically last year, it was like a steal even getting from for 1 year for $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
My theory is, I mean, if he can be like 2/3 of what he was last year, plus Corey can like semi-return to form, frankly, like we basically got the best 1-2 like punch as far as a starter and a backup guy possible. And God forbid if something really serious went down with either of those two guys, we actually got a third safety net in that Daly, a guy who ended up finally showing himself. We stashed in like Rockford for the longest amount of time, and we recently extended him for like 3 years, if I recall.
Yeah, Colin D'Elia, they brought him back. So I mean, it was definitely an important add, and I think that was something too that, you know, you look at Crawford, and you were right. He has been, you know, down. Hasn't been awful. Still a 90.8% save percentage, and his goals against was 2.93, his highest in a long time. But that was mostly due to the defensive inefficiencies. And you look at Lehner, like you mentioned, a 2.13 goals against average and a 93% save percentage. So he was absolutely fantastic. And a big thing that I was trying to go into is I don't think Corey Crawford at the end of the year is going to be the starting goalie for the Chicago Blackhawks.
Bingo. Well, I don't even think he's going to be on the team after this year. That's how far I'm going to go.
I just don't think he's going to be healthy enough.
And here's where I'm going with that is the one thing that we're kind of leaving off on Lehner is he was a Vezina Trophy finalist last year. Like one of the best goalies last year, and he's 27 years old.
One of the Senators' best prospects back in 2009.
Exactly. And like the thing that Sam that you were talking about is him and Corey Crawford could be the 1-2 punch in the net, in the crease that we need. And it's like reading different articles are kind of comparing it to when we had Corey Crawford and Ray Emery, where people were saying like the only time that Corey Crawford had like real competition for the starting job was when we had Ray Emery as the backup. And Lehner could be that guy. And I think towards the end of the year, because they are similar, I think it's going to be, you know what? Both these guys are on contract years. Corey Crawford's, 35, 34?
Yeah, he'd be 35 next year.
Lehner's going to be entering, 28 years old. I think this is going to be kind of a passing of the torch year where it's like Crawford starts out the starter. Lehner may take it from him this season. But by next year, if Lehner proves what he's done, he had 93% save percentage in 46 games last year with the Islanders, his highest since 2015, 2016. We could be looking at the newest starting goalie for the Hawks moving forward after this year even.
And I think one thing that's going to help Crawford and obviously Lehner too is the defensive pairings last year for the Islanders was pretty great. And I mean, that is also a part of what teams can do with their goalies. But
and our defense sucked.
Yeah, but that's why you went out and saw two big additions with Mata and DeHaan, and I absolutely love that DeHaan move. And a big thing now is just how much of a step or how much of a step forward or how at least stagnant can Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook stay, because you add these guys. Mata's fairly slow, so is Brent Seabrook, but so far through the preseason they've been looking very good together.
But Ollie's a smart defender. Like he's slow, but he's a smart defender out there.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, there's DeHaan, Keith, Seabrook, and Mata are all smart. They're not negatives out there. They're just not these blazing, defenders that you see in the NHL. I do think though, as long as they can play smart and force turnovers and just make sure that they're not keeping the puck in the zone too long. This is something that could be beneficial, and I think making those additions is just Dan Bowman's move of, all right, we know that this team last year was 6 points away from making the playoffs after this crazy streak, and we see that this offense can provide such a punch. You just need these defenders, and if Brent Seabrook, who we know is a very smart player, at least when he was at his peak, and if Duncan Keith can still continue to be a very smart player, this could be a defensive core that kind of just gets rebuilt on the fly and is able to save this Blackhawks team. I think that they'll be fighting for a wild card. I don't think they're going to be crazy competitive, but you make these additions to the defense, you make these additions to the goaltending situation. I do think this is going to give them at least more of a boost than what they were at last year. They're not going to be competing with the Islanders, who are the worst team I've seen in a very long time in the NHL.
Well, Sam, I wanted to ask you this, kind of going with the defense, because I wanted to throw this fact in there. I was looking at an article on The Athletic where they had ranked the Blackhawks defensemen coming into this year as 22nd in the league, and kind of looking at different Hawk sites. A lot of people in Hawk Nation are like, it's kind of low for us. Like, I know we were bad, but like we made the moves needed to get better. What should be the expectations with with our defensemen, I'll say, for the Hawks coming into 2019-2020?
I think it's like we made enough significant improvements that we should be taking a step forward. I think it's still 50-50 chance if, depending upon some of the rookies we got currently as far as the prospect roster, who might be actually making opening day. Because I think Adam Boquist especially has been making some noise from what I've been seeing with some of his highlights recently. The thing is, I think even if we do put in some of those rookie kids to help out, like with Seabrook and Keith, since they're slowing down in their later years, I still think there is going to be some room for error because, there are growth pains and this would be like their first year of actually seeing NHL action for the first time. So there could be some frustration as far as they could be making some mistakes here and there. So that sort of could fluctuate our overall performance.
Yeah, a big thing with Boquist, he was sent down to Rockford, but the talk is that he's going to work down on his defense down there, and that it wouldn't be shocked if he is brought up at some point throughout this season, because he has looked so good, especially offensively. But yeah, he isn't going to be on the opening day roster, but he has been looking very impressive so far.
Because I think like the other thing as far as like our current defensive prospects overall, I've been reading, especially the last year, they basically adopted a whole aspect of like, we're just going to get as many freaking kids as possible and see who's going to end up like maturing to be out that number one guy. The thing ultimately it's been looking like, though, I think there's very much still doubt if any of these guys currently, the prized ones especially, is like that true number one defenseman guy who can like lead the group in the near future, like Duncan Keith was back in his prime years a couple years ago. You know?
Aren't we hoping that's Gustafsson, though? I always screw up his last name. Eric. Aren't we hoping that that's him, though? Like, had a good year last year, but he's still young.
I mean, he's 27, so no. Yeah, and he's likely, it's pretty much a contract year for him, so it's unlikely that he would even stay this year. I would be highly shocked if he took over the Duncan Keith level. I mean, Duncan Keith was probably a top 2 defenseman last year, or not last year, at the peak of his career. I mean, he was incredible. And, so many cup runs. I don't think he's ever going to be that type of player Gustafsson is. I think the players that are in the system that could have that opportunity would be a guy like Boquist. I don't know if he's ever going to have the defensive side to him, but he could possibly be like a fellow Swede of his own. I think he's a Swede, but he could be like an Erik Karlsson type, where he is just such a playmaker at that defensive position. I don't think there is that type of roster, but like Sam said, it is a position where they are just trying to get as many bodies as possible, and that's why it was shocking when they traded Henry Yukiharo to get the kid from the Sabres, blanking on his name, who it's kind of iffy if he's even going to be consistent out there. When they traded him for Nylander, it's iffy if he's going to even make a contribution to this team this year. So it was shocking when they made that trade, but I think right now the 6 that you see out there, being Mata, being Seabrook, being Keith, being Gustafsson, being Murphy, and being DeHaan, I think those are probably going to be the 6 that you see from the Hawks. And if anyone follows out, it might be Murphy, and that would be the sub-in of Boquist, because I don't think you're going to be able to move Seabrook's contract at all. He's stuck on this team. Same with Keith, and you're not going to get away from DeHaan and Mata.
And Seabrook's got no move clause until 2022, and Keith until he's a free agent in 2023, also no move clause.
So, Sam, looking at this, we look at the playoffs. It was a down year last year. Hawks not making it. Do you think this is a team that will make the playoffs this year?
I do believe so. It's probably going to be 6th through 8th at best, frankly. I would totally forget about trying to even try to take the division, because the Central is going to be a bloodbath as far as like how many teams have sort of basically rearmed themselves at the deadline and just made a flurry of moves as far as like going from one team to another right now.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you that they're going to probably make the playoffs. Iffy on what spot that they will, but I do think that they're better than Arizona. I do think that they're probably at least more consistent than Colorado, although Colorado could even jump up. I think there's questions, too, with how well can Winnipeg be at their top. I think that it's pretty locked in that St. Louis is going to return to where they were last year. They had a struggling in the first half, but clearly they ended up as hot as you could possibly end up. But they made nice offseason additions. I think it would be tough with some of the teams and the talent that is in the Western Conference. Vegas can even fall off a little bit as well. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Hawks made it, because when you have Patrick Kane, who just had a career year, you had Jonathan Toews, who just had a career year as well. If those guys are able to capitalize on those opportunities and they're able to keep up the offensive output that they were able to last year, along with Dylan Strome taking steps forward, seeing Alex DeBrincat taking a step forward. Hopefully Andrew Shaw coming back will be able to add 45 to 60 points this year as well. And Brandon Saad, he hasn't been the Brandon Saad that we knew when he first departed, but he could always flip that switch as well. So there's guys on this top six that can make offensive impacts, and it's just going to come down to what they can do defensively and what the goaltender situation can be like. Because if Crawford is healthy, if Lehner is healthy, if this defense is able to be okay at best, this offense can carry them. Well,
I'll throw in another question when it comes to the offense. It's not really like a question of like, is it going to be there or not, but it's more of like we can expect it to maybe gel more at the beginning of the year. If you look at the power play situation for our offense beginning of the year and then after the calendar turned to 2019, the Blackhawks had the third most efficient power play after January 1st. And like, to me, I look at that and I go, okay, so by middle of the season around, our offense started to gel. The players started to get familiar with one another because we didn't have, we had some moves and some trades, but like with most of this core of this offense being together, can that power play that converted on 20% last year that was 15 best, can that be even higher this year, starting from the beginning of the year, not just after January 1st?
That mainly was due to finally Jeremy Colleton's impact kind of being put in, I believe. That was also around the time that I believe they acquired Dylan Strome. So I think it was more of just the shifting of going from Q to going with Jeremy Colleton. I'm intrigued to see what will happen. He took over around November 6th, and I think changes started coming in after a month. But
could we see that more solidified from day one?
No, because watching the Blackhawks over the past 10 years or whatever, this has always been a team that either your power play is great and your penalty kill sucks, or your penalty kill is phenomenal and your power play sucks. So I have no idea what to trust, because it could be, this penalty kill is the best in the league and the power play can't score a goal, even though you have Jonathan fucking Toews, Dylan Strome, and Alex DeBrincat on one line, along with Jonathan Toews on the second line. So this could be a mystery bag of whatever. This could be a team that just had a really weird hot streak and that they could be really bad. But I think just with the fact that you have Jonathan Toews and you have Patrick Kane, these guys are such impactful players, and the youth of Dylan Strome and Alex DeBrincat and the chemistry that they have, I do think that they're going to be able to at least propel them to a playoff spot, because I don't think this defense is going to be that bad. So I don't know if the power play is going to live up to that type of hype, and I don't know if the penalty kill is going to be even passable. But I do think that this team has still got enough veterans that they know how to win night in, night out, and it might be a grind to get to that 90-point threshold to make the playoffs or anywhere around there. But I do think at the end that they do have enough talent when it comes to stars and Toews and Kane, and I don't care what you think about Toews, he is a star. And with that, I think that you have this youth movement as well, and guys that have been there like Saad and Shaw to propel them into the playoffs. So I would be shocked if they don't make the playoffs. I do think that they made enough additions defensively to get them there, and the only thing I think that would hold them back would be injuries.
I would say like a significant difference, especially I noticed with Colleton's overall like hockey schemes versus Joel's, is, for example, like the defensive assignments, like on a penalty kill, I sort of read in an article, like Colleton's all about doing man-on-man coverage, while Joel was more zone.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think Joel's overall strategy is about trying to use, like, the Hawks' inert skill overall as the main offensive output with their schemes. But the thing with Colleton is he's more about our actual speed overall, in essence, because he wants to basically, with the man-on-man coverage, he wants to use, like, our speed to our advantage in order to, like during penalty kills, to, like, create turnovers so we can get some, like, additional offense going.
Yeah.
And wear out the opposing teams.
And that's where
overall.
I am concerned a little bit, just because I think he was playing that just due to the personnel that he did have. He was trotting out Michael Roosevelt out there in 2015 and stuff like that. But now I still don't know if the personnel exactly fits that with Colleton. And I think with him being so young and him getting the job so quickly, I think that he would probably just want to make an impact the way that he knows how to make an impact, at least coaching wise. But with the way that I see the roster laid out, I don't know if that's going to be necessarily how this team's going to end up in the end of the season playing the way that they do, at least when it comes to penalty kills, because this is going to be a team that you're going to need to trot out Brent Seabrook probably out there in the penalty kill situations. Same with Duncan Keith, and these guys are getting older, these guys are getting slower, and I don't know if they're going to be able to have that type of speed to play up and have the type of stamina as well to do that, unless they go to unlike what most teams do, not using your best 4 defensemen on penalty kills, but using all 6 and just making sure that the speed plays up. But even then, that's going to rely on a ton of dumping, and that might not lead to the offense that he wants to create, the penalty having to create. It's definitely an interesting situation. I do think that Jeremy Colleton is a very good coach, and it sucks that Q had to leave because he is such a very good coach, and he was a legend here in Chicago. But I do think that Colleton is a very good young mind, and I think that a big thing that he'll need to do is either realize the type of players that he has and best utilize them, or at least be able to listen to the guys that are in the locker room and around him that have been to multiple Stanley Cups and say, all right, this is what works best for us in finding a blend. And I think that they did do that in the second half of the season, and that's obviously why they had that massive run where they were averaging, I think, or on pace over an 82-game stretch to win 96 points or to have 96 points, which would have been good enough for a playoff spot. So I think Colleton is definitely a very good hire, and I think that he was going to be a very interesting coaching career, but his consistency and his ability to make these players the best that they can be by using the right system is going to be a thing that I'm going to follow throughout this whole entire season.
An interesting analytical thing I actually been reading since I think 2005 with our last Cup win, we were sort of like the forerunners as far as trying to introduce this pace of the offense. Speed is the game, basically, evolution to hockey. What I found is it's how the Golden State Warriors emphasize shooting and the pace when they won their title. It's basically both in the NBA and in the NHL, you've sort of had a speed evolution in a sense with the offensive scheme. Because a couple of years ago, all our core guys were in their prime, so it's they could be fast. But then it's 5 years later, they're in their early 30s, so they're going to slow down. But the thing is, everybody else in the NHL sort of you know what? Going more lean and speedy, it's actually a huge advantage as far as trying to do your offensive scheme as far as in the game. So it's you have all these type of forwards, especially in the draft, Alex DeBrincat, for example. They're really scrawny looking guys, but they're getting picked in the top 15 these days because they're lean. They're like spider monkeys. It's they're so small, but it's hard for you to take them down because they just move demons as far as on the ice.
Yeah.
They're just putting up 20, 40 points in a given two month span in a couple months,
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think a big thing too is you saw that with the Penguins two cup runs in 2017 and 2016. They kind of perfected that whole speed idea of making sure that they're just putting pressure on you consistently, and that line of Carl Hagelin, Patrick Hornquist, and I think it was Phil Kessel, or I think it was Nick Bonino. It was the HBK line where I think Kessel was a part of it. Where they were consistently just trying to use that speed and just they were a complete mismatch. And can the Hawks do that? Possibly. I think Strome, DeBrincat, and Kane would be that line if doing so. I just wonder then again about the defense. But you look at the defense that they did have. Mata was a part of that. Justin Schultz was a part of that. Mark Streit was a part of that, and he was like 39 years old. Ron Hainsey was a part of that, and he was super old too. Trevor Daley was super old. So they really didn't have that much speed defensively. So I do wonder that, if they are able to be decent defensively, and clearly they have the goaltending when they're healthy, I do think that it could be a very interesting team this year. And it just comes down to production and performance. And if they're able to be consistent, unlike they were last year, this team could be dangerous again because you do have at least star power, like I was saying. So let's give our final thoughts. Ricky, final thoughts on the Blackhawks season.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to be focusing mostly on the defensemen, just what pairings we use, how those new guys coming in, what do they do, and then really the goalie situation of Corey Crawford. Is this like what you said earlier? Like, is this where it's kind of the passing of the torch and Crawford then becomes the backup? And is it kind of like what I said, where after this year, bye Crawford, it's been great, but we're going to move on without you?
I don't know if they're going to move on with him per se, just because they might bring him back if he is healthy enough just to stick
That's
around.
Another
if
he hasn't played 50 games since 2014, 2015?
He's been dealing with massive concussion injuries, so I mean that's the biggest thing. Is doesn't
I'm sorry,
want to play.
16-17 was he hasn't played 50 games since 16-17 where he played 55.
Yeah, it's just mainly injuries with him, so I don't know if he wants to continue after this. Sam, final thoughts. What do you think about the Blackhawks 2019 season?
I'm very optimistic. I mean, with all the free agency and the drafting moves they've done and trades, I think we're going to be at least shooting for 7th or 8th spot in the wild card, and we can at least get in again.
Yeah, and we saw last year, all you need to do is get in.
And, I mean, worst-case scenario, if they miss it by a couple games, I'm perfectly all right with that because we're making a step in the right direction. And the real game changer is even though we barely missed out on getting in, like at in the last month, the lottery balls were on our luck, and we got that third pick, and we added a franchise-changing forward who's going to be helping us in the near future to return to prominence.
Yeah, and I was just very pissed off that we did not get the Jack Hughes lottery, but we were close enough, and that's all I could be happy for. But I agree with you that there is much to be optimistic about for this Blackhawks team, and with the players that you do have, they can make an impact still, and I would be optimistic that they can make the playoffs. If they don't, if they're competitive, I'll be happy, but hopefully they make the playoffs because that's what any fan wants. And this is super fans, by the way, so we do want to thank Sam for joining us and bringing some super fan passion to this podcast.
And the first time we get to say this on the podcast, for the Bears, we said, fuck the Pack, fuck the Red Wings.
Yeah, fuck the Red Wings. And we want to thank Sam for being a patron and coming on. You can be like Sam by joining us at patreon.com/MostOutPodcast. Sam, thank you for finally letting me to talk some hockey on this podcast. We appreciate it.
We're going to convert people. We're going to convert.
I hope they do. Come to the good side. It's a fun sport. But anyways,
we'll get Dave to watch hockey.
Yeah, for Dave, who was earlier on the Bears-Vikings preview, for Ricky Widmer, for Sam, I'm Sean Anderson. We'll see you next time on Superfans.